All right, back with Eric and Paul. Got to get Eric to the airport today. This will be our last video, last in this series of videos until our next series of videos. It's been a pleasure as always. You do excellent work. You should travel the country doing your carpentry and teaching people paleo. You should.
Well, hopefully I'll do a little bit of that in Kansas, Oklahoma here coming up.
Awesome.
Hopefully.
What do you got?
Well, we're going to look at 2 Kings.
Keep him in line, Paul. He'll pull some fast ones, so just smack him or something if he needs it. I do.
So, 2 Kings chapter 17. The key, you might say, to the whole study, what we call Erictology, because of the Hebrew word spelled Ayin Resh Kaf, happens to sound like Eric, which is my name, but Ayin Resh Kaf is the Hebrew word that means to assess, appraise, evaluate, compare, prepare. Basically the word for a dictionary, a lexicon, a museum, archives, registry, a bride preparing herself, a big table for a banquet being prepared, ordering and putting on display something for its greatest regard. To put something in such a format that it can be appreciated at value, at an increased value. Remember hearing a story once, there was an auction, an old violin, and okay, it looks like a nice old instrument, people bid a little bit, and then a guy came over and picked it up and played that thing. I don't know whether it was a Stradivarius or whatever it was, but he played it and just blew everybody's mind, and instantly the price was elevated hundreds of times of what they had previously offered, because they realized that violin's value is not just what it looks like as an antique, but the resonance, the sound that wood can make if you have the right guy playing it. And when somebody picked it up that knew its value and was able to make it be appreciated to the other people that had, you might say, the means to pay for its worth. Whoever was there at the auction, did they know how to play the violin, or would they have it in their collection as a rare item, or maybe they could hire somebody to play it for them, whatever. But the point is, certain people can afford things and other people can play things, but everybody can appreciate them if they are presented in such a way to appreciate them. That's what the word Eric means. So this word Erictology, and when I mention things like the Erictology study method, it's basically cephering the dots, connecting the letters, going back and looking at the microscopic little, you might call it pedantic or punctilious. You know those words? Meticulous detail, scrutinizing examining every little jot and tittle, every little dot of the I, every little cross of the T, minute examination, investigation, doing the detective work of saying, what's going on? Why did Yahuwah say this? Why is it written this way? Why these letters? Why is this word misspelled? For example, Stone's Tanakh, it's a great book, but I don't trust the English. But you'll see sometimes in the Hebrew, there'll be a word written and then a bracket with a slight different spelling of that word. What are they doing? Well, what they're saying is that the way it was written in the ancient texts that they copied was written this way, and then in the brackets they'll say, and we don't understand why it was written that way, because this is the way it was really supposed to be spelled. So in other words, did somebody misspell the word because they made a scribal error way back when, or was it misspelled on purpose? Or has modern language moved in such a way that the ancient text just doesn't agree? But either way, we believe this is what the word was trying or meant to say, so we're going to put that word in brackets. But we're going to be true to the ancient text and say this is the way the word was spelled. Well, so I pay no attention to the bracketed word, and I try to look at the spelling of the original word as it has been handed to us, and figuring that, well, it was written that way. Let's just assume, because nobody knows, let's assume that it was written that way on purpose, and there's something about the spelling of the word if you're looking at the individual letters and not just the translation value. Translation value is, what does that word mean? Oh, Aleph means ox, okay, great, let's go. Aleph means ox. Well, Aleph also means to be teamed up, like oxen are teamed up. Aleph also means 1,000. Aleph can also mean 1. Aleph also can mean taught, trained, and domesticated. Certain animals are easier to train. They have a mind. I guess the ox is one. A dog is another one. Dogs are easier to train than cats.
Oh, yeah.
So the dog is more of an Aleph than a cat. But dog's not an ox. What are you talking about? Taught, trained, and domesticated, of the house. So both Aleph and Bet both have those same meanings. My point is, that's Sephering. That's Erictology. Trying to order and orientate the letters, like this chart here. You mind catching that chart?
Let's look at the chart.
That's just known as the chart.
The chart.
A little faded, but it's in the sun. Anyway,
The gun.
all the letters compared to each other so that the language give reference to itself in terms of what the meanings are and how they affect each other.
How can I get a chart?
There, if you go to Erictology, E-R-I-K, Eric, because it's Ayin Reshkov, T-O-L-O-G-Y, the study of this Eric assessment, Erictology.net. You could download the chart and have your own printed up. We have some left. I had printed up originally a couple of thousand of these, and I believe I have probably 50 or 60 left. So you can email me at PaleoSFR, which is like the word Sefer, Samic Pei Resh, PaleoSFR at gmail.com, and got a few left. Anyway, the point is,
I should also add that those cost a lot of money. You've invested tens of thousands of dollars in these things, so
thousands of dollars.
a little donation would be appreciated for those that can.
To those that can, it would be appreciated. This section right here, in the middle of the chart, is what I call the Mishkan Pattern. You want to point at that again? So here is outside the fence. So the Mishkan Pattern is between these two black bars. The big white fence, the barbecue grill, the laver, wash basin. Then inside the covered place you got the menorah, the table of showbread, the altar of incense. Then the most set apart, the Kadosh Kodashim, Holy of Holies, you've got Ark of the Covenant. And then above the Kadosh Kodashim place was the pillar of fire, pillar of smoke, and outside, the place of the red heifer sacrifice. All that, but specifically in between here, is what I call the Mishkan Pattern, and here's 10 places, or 10 ways you can read it.
Now you found hundreds.
Over 500 places.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show two right in here in 2 Kings that are so obscure, you would say, oh, come on, that's not... If you know what these concepts are and what the letters mean and what the thematic essence is of each one of these pieces of the Mishkan. Again, you've got the big white fence. According to, very interesting, Project 314, Andrew Hoy, H-O-Y, he believes the Mishkan was round and a dome canopy, nothing like the rectangular model that we've inherited for all these centuries. Really interesting stuff he's got. A big round circle at the top, so you look down, it's almost like this eyeball looking up. Anyway.
Just out of curiosity, I asked you if he was a flat earther.
Don't! Well, that's a model of what might be considered the flat earth, but that's not necessarily why or how he came up with that model.
No, I understand. Completely separate.
Whether or not he is a flat earther, I couldn't say for sure. I don't think he's on record as ever having said that. Everything's hearsay and presumption, so I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
But how do you know if the earth isn't flat? Do you believe all the hype you hear? Do you believe every piece of disinformation you're handed?
Have you ever studied the Coriolis effect?
Isn't that when the butterfly crawls out of the chrysalis? Is that what you're
Close.
talking?
That's kind of a metamorphic effect.
That's a chrysalossic effect. That's not the same thing.
Coriolis effect has with the rotation of has to deal with the rotation of the Earth, and say for a bullet, if it was fired in this direction as opposed to the rotational direction, things change, and things change.
Oh, it works. The Coriolis effect actually is a proven fact.
Yeah.
Well, now you got me confused. Now I don't know what to do with all this stuff.
Let's just move on.
Let's just move on to the.
Because I find it to be a distraction.
Okay, 2 Kings. Couple places where we can read about this Mishkan pattern, and the whole reason for the Mishkan pattern is to say, of all the stuff that you can't believe, disinformation, disinformation is intentionally skewed, twisted, or opposite that the people who are sending out information do in order to cause confusion. This whole thing of the flat earth versus the spherical earth, I have no idea which way is which. I don't know. I was a little kid and get taught one thing. You grow up, you get taught another. You grow up a little bit more, and you get taught that those guys are liars. It's like, okay, whatever. I don't know. Then you can look at what science figures and say, look, at the facts are that you could do these experiments and tests and prove this, but other guys do experiments and they test to prove that, and it's like, well, is it left up to me? I don't know. I don't know. Teach me some scientific, give me some tools that I can apply. Here, there was some yellow stuff on that roofing yesterday, and you said, hey, is it, I think it might be oil, or it might be the Caleb the dog. Say, well, taste it and find out.
You did tell me that.
Break it down.
I don't know. I mean, what tools do we have by which to determine and assess what the reality is,
Smell first.
Well, you can smell it first, but some things they put cherry flavor in on purpose just to, or peanut butter. Boy, if it tastes like peanut butter, it's got to be good. Unless it's a mousetrap, and then it's like, good. So misinformation, you might say, that's just a mistake. But what I'm saying is that this world, even in the medical and scientific community, is loaded with traps, snares, lies, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, agenda, doctrines of demons. Oh, gosh. How do you know anything's true? The Mishkan pattern, that's how. Because this Mishkan pattern is keyed, oriented to the 7 days of creation, this pattern of the Mishkan, Tabanit Mishkan, right there in Exodus 25 through 27, big white fence, barbecue grill called the altar of sacrifice, the brazen laver, or the wash basin, those were, you might say, outside, and then inside the covered place was the menorah, table of showbread, altar of incense, and then the most set apart, the high priest only, one time a year, was allowed to go in there, and that was the Kadosh Kodashim. And if he went in there unclean or somehow defiled, boom, he'd be struck dead. Yep. If he touched something in there that he wasn't supposed to touch, boom, knocked dead. If he came in there with an impure heart, wham, just knocked dead. It's like, wow. And you think, well, okay, what's the big deal about this? And I'm not trying to disparage other preachers, other teachers. I'm not trying to call anybody out by name. But there was a music video of somebody singing a beautiful song, and there was a picture of the Mishkan, and there's this Levite priest sort of guy going through some routine that he was supposed to do, tending the Mishkan, and there's a picture of a girl, dressed in Middle Eastern clothing, and she sneaks in behind him and goes into the Mishkan. It's like, what? That's a death sentence. You can't do that. What do they do? What are they showing in this video? Oh, yeah, but it was a nice, pretty song, and she's saying, oh, coming before your presence, and it's like, the women weren't allowed to do that. A regular guy wasn't supposed to do that. You can only go in there if you were a Cohen, a priest, Levite. If it was your job, Yahweh takes this stuff seriously. It's like, so you see stuff on the internet, it's like, what the heck are we being taught? Mm-hmm. We're being taught some bad stuff. And how do you know where death is? How do you know where death is? Brings me to another subject. We'll get back to this in a moment. In, I think it's 2 Corinthians 3:6, I think, if offhand, it says that there's The administration of death in letters, Paul was talking about. We were given this administration of death in letters. Talked about this before, but the word administration is diakonos, where you get the word deacon, one who tends and serves. And then there's the word death, and then the word letters is grammaton. And it's like, yeah, these letters are death. We know that the letters kill. I heard a guy giving a sermon about that. And it's like, these letters are life. What do you mean the letters kill? Well, the law, the things written down on stone are this offensive curse law of death. And it's like, wait a minute. But then there was one time I was in Israel, and there was a little barbed wire fence. You could step right over the thing. It wasn't very well maintained, but there was a sign. And the sign said, "Do not cross this fence. There's a landmine field out there." It was up against Syria, up in the Golan Heights area. And if you step over this line, it's on your own, but there goes your arms and legs. Whoa! That sign was deaconing, administrating where death is by the use of grammaton, grammar, words, letters. So Yahuwah has told us where death is, administering, or like a hostess or a nurse, somebody who's facilitating and helping us comprehend, you do this and you're in big trouble. You will blow off your arms and legs and maybe die. That's where death is. And then Paul goes on to say, if we have a certain high regard for, I don't want to go in the landmine field, warning, mean dogs, junkyard dogs guarding this junkyard, do not try to sneak in here. Okay, are you going to take that seriously? Okay, but even more so, the Spirit, the Ruach of Elohim, administers life. He wasn't saying that the Torah, the law, was evil, was bad, was somehow inappropriate, wrong, or impossible to regard. I think he was saying the opposite. But again, we've been given disinformation as an agenda by our enemies, and misinformation by people who mean well, who just don't know.
Right.
But I believe that this Mishkan pattern is at the core, at the heart of what Yahweh's truth is, because those things that just looks like objects of the Mishkan, the fence, the barbecue grill, the laver, line up with the spring feast, Passover, unleavened bread, and Shavuot, 50 days of counting, Pentecost, 50 days count, and then the menorah, lining up with Yom Teruah, blowing of trumpets. See, I say this because other people have a different way of looking at these. They leave off Shemini Atzeret and they give 2 festivals to Shavuot, the first day and the last day, instead of 50 days of counting as being the festival, like a pregnancy and giving birth on the Pentecost, the 50th day, the noon. And by equating this to the noon jumping out of the mem, that's like baby being born. Mem is incubating, gestating a pregnancy. Anyway, then you've got the table of showbread lining up with the ayin, and then you've got Sukkot lining up with the letter Pei, and then the Zadi with Shemini Atzeret, with the Ark of the Covenant. My point is, that pattern that I found thematically structured within over 500 places through the Scripture, I keep making mention of, and some people say, well, I still don't know what you're talking about by that. So it's like, well, okay, so we're going to look at 2 Kings 17, and instead of saying, okay, here's Passover, unleavened bread, and Shavuot, is these 3, I'm going to show you 3 other things. Okay, so it also lines up with the 7 days of creation and the Beatitudes, and so you find these, when you understand the heart of each picture, of each letter, then you can see it playing out, if you can see it. So, if you go to 2 Kings 17, verse 7. So, it starts off in 2 Kings 17, verse 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, son of Elah, became king over Israel and Samaria for 9 years. He did what was evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. Verse 3, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, went up against him, and Hoshea became his vassal and sent him tribute. Verse 4, then the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea had betrayed him, because he sent messengers to the king of Egypt, a guy named So, and wanted Egypt to support him in rebelling against the king of Assyria. Well, why was Assyria against Israel, because Israel had gone into pagan idolatry, turned away from the Torah, and Yahweh stirred up enemies against him. We've been talking about this in a couple other videos. And so Hosea, instead of turning back to Yahweh and say, can I get this monkey off my back? Can I get this horrible enemy to quit hassling me? Why is Portland, Oregon going nuts? Seattle, Minneapolis, a few other cities. Why? Oh yeah, well, it's those guys. It's Antifa and BLM, and it's the commies, I tell you. The Nazis and the commies. It's Israel. Not the guys on the other side of the world. It's the people who want to be Yahweh's people, known as Israel, doing stupid stuff. Which is to say, being lied to, following the disinformation, the misinformation, and not regarding the Torah. That's what I think is going on. Because all through the scripture, Yahweh says, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to stir up your enemies. Or actually, what I think is happening, it's the devil. No, it's not even the devil. What I think is happening is that Yahweh constructed the universe as a mechanical device with a certain flow, and when Israel behaves a certain way, it moves the flow and brings in the enemies, causes, generates, creates the enemies, creates the trouble. Just like that verse we were looking at the other day. Oh, you guys think you figured it out if you fast, if you don't eat, don't sleep, don't bathe, don't feel nice and comfortable, do something to afflict yourself in the day of Yom Kippur, then you can get the good stuff, and meanwhile perpetuate your hostilities against one another, and you think you're going to get the blessing. You're wrong. You're working it opposite. You're actually calling in, you might say, the demonic troubles upon yourself for having the wrong reason and motive and thinking that you can maneuver the spiritual dynamics behind the scenes of this earth. But heavens and earth are all structured around Yahuwah's people listening, guarding, and doing his Torah. Those are the three verbs that he uses all the time. Listening, shema, guarding, shamar, and ayin shin he, oseh or asha, however you want to pronounce that, doing, producing. If his people who are called by his name would hear, repent, humble themselves and pray, this is in 2 Chronicles when he was talking to Solomon, then he will hear from heaven. If we hear him, he will hear. Then he will look over his people to guard them, shomer, and then he will put into action healing of their land. So it all goes back to us. It's like to try to say, hey, shoot the people who are burning and looting, shoot the people from Antifa and BLM, lock them up. It's putting a Band-Aid on cancer. Oh, yeah, we can't see it anymore. It's at the heart. It's the adrenochrome. It's the people that are child trafficking and doing all this other, looting of the other nations around the earth. American foreign policy. Is that the problem? American foreign policy? Probably, but beyond that, it's the hearts of us. Anyway, it goes on to say, in the 9th year of the reign of Hoshea, king of Assyria, captured Samaria and exiled Israel to Assyria. Okay, we talked about this 2,730-year curse. This is when it started, 2 Kings 17. 721 BC, from my understanding of when this happened. And I had heard that there was a 13-year siege. Now this says he did it after 3 years, but then they'd been hassling him for some time. But from what I understand, when they first sent in some kind of subterfuge of attack, it would have been 13. This is just history as I understand it. Maybe it's wrong, but that's why if at 2010 was the end of the 2,730-year curse from 2 Kings 17, you wind back 13 years, comes to 1997, and certain things happened in that span between 97 and 2010, where people of Israel, of people you might say of Israelite lineage of the 12 tribes that lost their identity, came back and go, hey, what the heck is going on? And that's what this video is going to talk about. And I'll show you a couple things in a few minutes. I got to talk fast because we're burning time here. Verse 7, and so it was that the children of Israel that's all 12 tribes, sinned to Yahuwah their Elohim, who had taken them out of the land of Egypt from under the oppression of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they feared the gods of others. Whoa, that's it, number one, right out of the gate. So the big white fence that represents the four colors, blue, purple, red, with white linen, blue, purple, red, white, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, with gold thread. We talked about this before, we're not going to go into it again, but I believe that those four colors represent Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, the hand of the Creator, the giver of the Torah, the Mashiach, the red, that's blue, purple, blue. Color of Yod, the hand of the Creator. That's who He is, maker of heaven and earth. The royal decrees of the Torah, the purple, the first Hey, the Vav, the red, the man, the blood, the Mashiach, and the second Hey, the white linen, walking in the ways of the royal decrees of the Torah, which are us, following Yeshua, the Vav, who was the incarnation of the Torah, the purple, the first Hey, which was the expression in words of the hand of the Creator, represented by the Ehyeh, who said, as you see is what I meant it to be. So that's the Aleph Hey Yod Hey. You can read that backwards. We talked about that. So for them to fear the gods of others, the word is Elohim Achrim, which is other gods or other deities, or that which comes future, next, strange, different. That's the word Achar. Well, wait a minute. That means you don't know and recognize because you have different information. Who is Yahuwah? Maker of heaven and earth. Oh yeah, I believe that God created the heavens and the earth. Is that Yahweh? Well, that's a place to start. But who else is He? The guy who gave the Torah. Yod. Oh, I believe He made the heavens and the earth. Great. Oh, we're all on the same page. Believe in one God? Okay, we're all on the same page. Wasn't it George Bush who said if you believe in one God as creator of heaven and the earth, you all believe in the same guy? So even if you believe in the Islamic Allah or in some Zoroastrian or Hindu, I don't know. But to at least believe there's one guy who created the heavens and the earth, it's like, okay, we got the Yod. But what's the Hey? The giver of the Torah. Whoa, now we got some distinction and separation. In fact, the Christian church maybe believes that He gave the Ten Commandments, so they put it on stone and put it in their courthouses, but He changed it. The Messiah changed it by rising from dead on Sunday. Only He didn't. Not on Sunday, it was on Saturday. But the point is, so now you got to say, which Messiah? Who's the Vav you believe in? So whether or not you believe in the Torah, that's a separator. Whether you not believe in this Messiah, that's a separator. And then the second, hey, what does it mean to walk in His steps? What are the robes of righteousness? Kill the infidel. If you kill the infidel, oh, you're righteous. No! Love your neighbor. Love your enemies. Gosh, come on. Each one, what I'm saying is each one of these four letters is a separation, a separator, and a means of distinction, zeroing in on who is this guy, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, that we say we believe in. And how then do we conduct ourselves as if it were robes of righteousness, walking in His ways? That's what distinguishes who is Yahuwah, the Elohim of our patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, or is it an Elohim Achrim? Is it somebody else's God that we just don't know because we've been duped by the disinformation and the misinformation over the years? So, Israel feared the gods of others. Then, verse 8, they walked in the decrees of the nations whom Yahweh had driven out before the children of Israel, and in the decrees that the kings of Israel had enacted. Well, that's the contrary to the Torah. So I'm here showing you, there's the big white fence. Who is He? The second thing is His Torah. So His Torah are His decrees. But instead of listening to the decrees of Yahweh, they listen to the decrees of the Goyim, the nations. And remember, the word Haggah means to ponder, to read, to meditate, to know how to phonetically determine what these letters mean. Navigation, rudder, steering wheel, helm. How do you negotiate your way through the words? Separates you being following of Elohim, of the Torah, versus the gods of the nations.
Yeah.
Okay, the third thing. The children of Israel imputed things that were not so to Yahweh, their Elohim. They're just not true. He wouldn't do that. How do you know what He would do? It's not of His heart. It's not of His essence. It's not of His likeness. It's not Him. the Yahuwah of Yisra'ěl would not have us blending Christmas, Easter, Sunday worship and call it him. So this lines up with the laver, where you get the seed of your husband Yahuwah impregnating you, and that you take it and nurture it and grow it, the gestation. This lines up with Shavuot. This lines up with Yahuwah being the Shem Zakar, the masculine name, the seed planting Zakar, and that the womb of the Mem is his woman Yisra'ěl. I mean, we've talked about all these things before. I'm mentioning, in case somebody hasn't seen those other videos, you can go back and watch. But what I'm saying is that the fertility thing, the woman versus man, the engagement is all through the scriptures. So to say, yeah, that's all pagan. You know, the steeple, why, that's a phallic thing, and only the heathens do that, so you shouldn't have a steeple on your church. It's the meaning of Zakar, of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. In fact, the Vav of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, in fact, the word Yama, yeah, gee, we talked about that the other day. That's the symbol. And so for Yahweh to say, you know, that word Yahweh, that's my Shem Zakar. It's like, that's not heathen, that's divine revelation. It's like, look, when you start looking at Hebrew, you get into this stuff, and you got to get over the Victorian. You got to engage it, or else you're not going to understand.
That's right.
I'm not trying to be gross or rude, but I'm just telling you where the reality is. So this whole thing of taking in the seed of Yahweh and nurturing it, why would the children of Israel impute things that were not so? It's not his DNA. It's not his identity to look at Christmas, Easter, and Sunday as his prescribed days of worship. Now, you can worship him any day. You can gather together and sing songs to him and have wonderful food, even on Christmas, even on Easter, even on Sunday. But to impute his identity and his agenda as being sacred when he specifically told us sacred, yeah, those are Jewish. Wrong! What'd they do next? They built themselves high places in all their cities. From the watchtower is a single tower. Well, that's a picture of the Psalmic. This watchtower, this do justly, watch over. It's like, what I'm saying is pictographically these things line up. Verse 10, they erected for themselves pillars. Those are like these Washington Monument. And Asherah trees upon every tall hill and upon every leafy tree, under every leafy tree. You know, the interesting thing about the leafy tree, we talked about this before, is that it's spelled Resh Ayin Nun Nun. How would you pronounce it? I don't know if you know how to read the Hebrew, but how would you try to pronounce R-A kind of N-N?
Ryan.
Two N's.
Ron?
Two N's.
Yeah.
Ranan.
Oh, Ranan. Okay,
Ranan. Ranan. Did you know Rhiannon, that great song by Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac, it was the name of a Welsh witch.
Oh, wow.
And Stevie Nicks had Welsh Witch Records when she went independent out of Fleetwood Mac. Why did she call it Rhiannon? Because it's the word for leafy tree. Now, is there any problem with a leafy tree? Well, those guys got pine needles, but that one's a really nice looking leafy tree there. In fact, I think that's an oak tree, and the Druids worship that. Doesn't mean oak trees or elm trees or maple trees are bad, but when people associate and assign worship to those things that Yahweh said not to, they become witchcraft, sorcery, heathenism, and here that the people of Israel went under the leafy trees of Rhiannon, and every tall tree. So does that mean to have these tall trees in your yard and the leafy oak trees? Does that mean that's a sin? That's evil? No, it's what the people of Israel assigned to say, no, let's worship there. Let's use this as an icon of our regard of Yahweh. We're supposed to use what he gave us. He gave us the Sabbath day, the seventh-day Sabbath, and said, don't work. No, I'm going to worship under leafy trees and oak trees and on Christmas and on Easter and have colored eggs and have lights and music and sing wonderful songs. To hell with the wonderful songs. He said, don't work on the seventh day. And if you think you want to worship him his way, his terms, or it's witchcraft, it's sorcery, it's not true. And you're what's bringing down the evil into this country. So am I. If I didn't know these things, I spent 50 years of my life never hearing a word. And wait a minute. Wasn't it the book, Fossilized Customs? Oh, there we go. You know, a guy turned up, he wrote a letter and said, I heard you mention Fossilized Customs, blue, white. I don't like that, man. I'm shutting it on. We're going to get to that in just a moment. I'm going to show you something in 2 Kings 17, or Daniel. I'm going to show you something in Daniel 12. Excuse me, Daniel 2. How much time we got, Terry?
You got about 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to get to Daniel 2 and show you something about that book, Fossilized Customs. You may not like it, or you might love it. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, let me get back to this. So the table of showbread, 2 stacks of bread, or were they put on shelves, screen shelves to air? You get different pictures. But if you had 12 loaves and you had 2 stacks, you might take the loaves and lean them up against each other, and whatever. The point is, these 2 different things is almost like this teeter-totter, scales of balance lining up with the letter Ayin, and here you have these 2 things they were doing, pillars and Asherah trees. Asherah, where we get the word Ishtar and Easter. Somebody else said, no, that's not where it came from, and it's like, okay, if you know better, let us know. But other than that, that's where this phonetics derive from, as far as I know. And if you got more details in your research, tell people. We've been lied to. What do I know? So the next thing has to do with the letter Pei, which would be the altar of incense. What does that line up with? Verse 11, they burned incense. Hey, what do you know? It fits the pattern. They burned incense there at all their high places, like the nations whom Yahweh had exiled before them. They did wicked things to anger Yahweh. Gosh darn it. Yahweh comes in and he cleans out all these nations that were doing heathen, idolatry, pagan stuff that Yahweh hated. He let the Israelites come in, and then they picked up and started copying all their stuff. It's kind of like, and I'm not condoning or validating the what you call the manifest destiny of the American expanse across the continent of North America, pillaging and ruining, but there were, according to a certain film series, 500 nations that existed in the Americas, and then the Spanish conquistadors and the British and the French came in, the American progression west, took them all, just destroyed them all, and went to the West Coast. And then what do? We turn, let's worship the way they did. Let's restore their temples and restore their god, their idols, and restore their customs and habits. And it's like, we better go back a little further. We better go back to what Yahweh said in his Torah. It's not what did the Aztecs and the Mayans do. It's not what the Comanche and the Sioux and the Apache did. It's not what they did in the days of the Reformation and the early church. It's not going back to the days of Constantine. Let's go back to the Torah. What did Yahuwah say to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? What did he say to Moshe? What insight did David have? Let's go back there.
Yeah.
The only safe place. And then the last piece of the Mishkan pattern, 12, they worshipped the execrable, E-X-E-C-R-A-B-L-E. Execrable? Have you ever heard that word before?
Nope. No.
They worshipped the execrable idols, concerning which Yahweh had told them, do not do this thing. Lining up with the Ark of the Covenant. Oh, we worship him. Oh, we worship the Creator of the heavens and the earth. Oh, he is our Lord and our God. And when he said, do not do this thing, and then when you realize that the church over the last 2,000 years, especially the Catholic Church, but who knows which pope or which bishop or which cardinal or which individual person stirred the whole thing up, but they'd find the traditions and customs and the rituals of the various nations that they went in to conquer under the Spanish flag, and they'd blend them together and say that by doing this, you're worshiping the Virgin Mary, and maybe they're not worshiping the Virgin Mary, but you're worshiping Jesus. It's like, but he told us not to blend things.
That's right.
He said, this is the way you worship me. Truth and kindness, righteousness, right ruling of judgment. don't work on the seventh day, keep these 7 Moedim.
That's right.
And mostly that's it. He also said, don't eat this food because it'll abominate you. Is that one of the 7 deadly sins? Or is that one of the sins which will actually send you to hell if you eat rat? And if you eat, there's all kinds of things. Squirrels, pork, crows. People eat all kinds of stuff. You know, you had a great story. You're wearing bluebird. Tell the bluebird story. This is a good dad.
Yeah. When I was up camping one year and I shot a blue jay with a BB gun, and my dad made me eat that. You know, he says if you kill something, you eat it. You only kill for food. But my dad said he ate it with me, and this happened twice in my life, and. Yeah.
The other one was a skunk, you say?
Oh, I killed a skunk.
And he made you eat it?
He made me eat it. I put it in the stew. It was horrible. But I learned a lesson.
Well, you know, Yahweh said, don't eat this. And you can't eat that. And when he put Adam and Eve in the garden, he said, eat whatever you want, but don't eat that tree. But I'm just saying, that's kind of a funny story. You're wearing blue there, it reminded me of that. But what I'm saying is, when Yahweh says, don't do this thing, and we do it, oh, but he's our God and we worship him. Sorry, somebody's giving you bad doctrine. It doesn't work that way. If you want to worship Yahuwah, Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, you got to do what he says. And any other voice to the contrary is a lie. It's either disinformation on purpose, or it's misinformation. And if it is coming from the devil, it's because Yahweh sent the devil to lie to us if we didn't like his stuff. So it still goes back to Yahweh. He's the guy who sets our enemies against us. Yep. And not only will he set the enemy against us, he said, I would have pulled you back from the brink of falling into the cliff. But he said, I'm going to shove you in. I'm going to be your death. It's like, whoa, gosh, you know, I mean, when you start reading the specific things that Yahuwah says he's going to do to his people, he means business. And when you do something he told you not to do, just like your dad, okay, you shot it, I told you not to shoot it, you're going to sit down and eat that. And it's like, I didn't shoot it to eat it. Well, you did shoot it and you're going to eat it. And Yahweh says this all the time. He says, when you do something by your hand, you're going to have to eat it. You drink this thing, look at him give these other guys to have to drink. He's going to take that and make you drink it. He's going to do that to our enemies. That's what he says numerous times. Only he's not going to sit down and eat with us. He's going to make us do it by ourselves. But anyway, I'm just saying. Okay, so there's the Mishkan Pattern, 2 Kings 7. I'm going to show you another, which is you might say the solution of how do we turn this thing around? How do we change what's going on? Let's look at 2 Kings chapter 13, which is the next verse. Yahweh had issued warning in Israel and in Judah through the hand of all the prophets of any vision, any real prophet that could see what's going on. Yahweh said, here, this is a big white fence. Repent from your evil ways. There's the big white fence. Here's Yahuwah, his kingdom, and here's outside in the darkness, like on the chart here, outside in the darkness, all your evil ways that you thought were okay, that you thought he didn't care, that you were told is this or that. But once you've confronted with the big fence of Yahweh, repent. Turn away from what you've been doing and say, okay, I want to turn to Yahweh. That's all the big white fence is I want to turn to Yahweh. What are the ways you're supposed to be? That's the next thing. That's inside. That's the Torah. So what has he said? Observe my commandments. Repent. That's a change of heart. To what? Step inside the fence. There's the barbecue grill. Observe my commandments and my decrees in accordance with the entire Torah that I commanded your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moshe, David, that I have sent you through my servants the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. Verse 14, but they didn't listen. There's the laver. He gave them his seed, and reject that. I'm going to get an abortion. They didn't listen, and they stiffened their neck. Like the neck of their forefathers who did not believe in Yahweh or Elohim, they rejected his decrees and his covenant that he had sealed with their forefathers. Oh, we don't need the Torah. It was done away with. That's no good. We couldn't do it anyway. It was impossible. He only gave it because it was impossible. Bad laws that we can't live by. You know that teaching of the book of the Torah, which is the book of the covenant? And his warnings that he warned them about, they turned away all those things. And that's then lines up with the labor, the mem, the memnut. And now we get to the psalmic. They went after the worthless and became worthless.
Yep.
There's the psalmic, engineered structure. What you go after, you become. And after the ways of the nations that surrounded them, just like we talked about before. The very thing that Yahweh did away with, they went back and stirred it back up, did some archaeology, and said, hey, let's hang that on the wall and be just like them that Yahweh got rid of. Concerning whom Yahweh had commanded them, do not like them. They did it anyway. Verse 16, they forsook all the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim and made a molten image for themselves, 2 calves. They are lining up with the 2 piles on the table of showbread. It's like, oh, Yahweh said do it this way. Hey, let's do it that way. Yahweh said rest on the 7th day. Hey, let's rest on the 1st day. Yahweh said have these 7 Moedim in 2 areas, the spring and the fall. Hey, let's have Christmas and Easter. Yeah, we'll have a few more. We can throw in Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Halloween and do what he said. He's given us the 7 Moedim plus Shabbat. I mean, come on. They made 2 calves, and now lining up with the altar of incense, they made Asherah trees and prostrated themselves to all the host of heaven and worshipped the Baal. Oh, that's our prayers, that's our incense. We're going to do it just like the pagans did, whom Yahweh destroyed. And they passed their sons and daughters through the fire, and here outlining with the Ark of the Covenant, the letter Zadi in the Kadosh Kodashim, they practiced divination and sorcery. And they dedicated themselves to do what was evil in the eyes of Yahuwah to anger him. Then Yahweh, see, that's the end of that. So that's the Mishkan Pattern. There's those 7 things. Then Yahweh, verse 18, 2 Kings 17, Yahweh became very angry with Israel and removed them from his presence. None remained except the tribe of Judah alone. And even Judah didn't observe the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim. They walked in the decrees of Israel. Israel just got kicked out. But see, the southern kingdom was given, I think it was another 130 years before they were taken over by Babylon. So you got the lost 10 tribes of the north, known as Ephraim or Israel, and you got the southern kingdom. He made that separation. Verse 20, so Yahweh rejected the entire offspring of Israel and oppressed them. Yahweh oppressed them. He delivered them into the hands of plunderers until he had cast them away from his presence. For Israel had torn itself away from the house of David. Jump down to verse 23. So Israel went into exile from their land to Assyria to this day, and here it is, 2,730 years later, even so today, and we're talking about the coming back. Now, I'm going to jump real quick over to Daniel and show you something else. We're talking about the that other video we did with the checkerboard, dressed in that, had the engineer's thing on, and talk about here there's a black and white, and you got the staging of the good guys, the bad guys, which side is which? Well, I'm not sure. Is Trump on this side or that side? Or you got Democrats, Republicans, you've got the Nazis and the commies and the capitalists, and you've got the Mayans and the Aztecs, you've got the Indonesians, and you've... Who's the good guys and who's the bad? And I pushed all the chess pieces off and said a game of rocks. So here, you want to grab that thing? So here, just for what it's worth, a little plate of rocks, and you know, some of these are molded. This was molded by the river, but this is where the Indians, natives here, had used them as tools. And it's like, so I put some stones on the plate, on the checkerboard, and said, a game of rocks. Why does Yahweh talk about rocks all the time? 5 minutes? What do we got?
Yeah, go ahead, 5 minutes.
This was used to chip and to make arrowheads and spear points. And it's like, but rocks are used all the time. Why? So I'm going to get real quick into Daniel, the thing in Daniel 2, but just give you a chance to say something, Paul, here. When Yahweh talks about rocks, there's this talk about, we maybe do another video about the rocks, but there's Stronghold, Masada is about a rock, the rock of divisions in 1 Samuel 23. David hit Goliath with a rock. They stand up a rock, Ebenezer. There's the giant rocks, hailstones, and Joshua 10 came down and wiped out a whole army. People like the sand of the sea, that Yahweh's going to make his people, sons of Abraham, so prolific. There'll be millions, but there's other times the enemy was like the sand of the sea. No rock like our Elohim, 1 Samuel 2:2, Deuteronomy 32:4. He's the rock, his works are perfect. Nourished with honey from the rock. We're talking about living stones. There was the 12 rocks. Why do you think he's all about rocks? What do you got to say about
I
that?
don't know. Rock has strength. It's a lot of times it's unmovable. I mean, these are movable, of course, but there's some rocks that are not. And it's just a. That's all I got.
So when somebody says Yahweh is my rock, David wrote that many times. My fortress, my refuge, my strength, I will not be moved. When he says Yahweh is my rock, what is that about? How do you respond to hearing those words?
He is my rock. My strength. Rock is strength.
Okay, but what about Bill Gates, threatening, trying to make it a law, international law, that you got to get vaccinated? How do you compare that to Yahweh is my rock?
I don't.
What do you mean? If Yahweh is my rock, how do I interface that with this threat of a news item?
Yeah, to me, you better listen to Yahweh. You better listen to Yahuwah instead of Bill Gates. I mean,
Okay, so
I don't know.
I'm gonna jump ahead here with that, but here, fossilized custom. Fossilized is to turn to rock. There's 3 or 4 words for rock or stone. There's eben, aleph bet nun. There's kifa, kaf pe he. There's a rock, which is zadi resh or zadi vav resh, and then there's samik lamed ayin, which means to petrify or become fossilized. There's a whole other video we can get onto that, but there's also this thing about a rock, really famous, Daniel 2:34. This maybe should be its own video, but let me show you real fast if I can get through this. Chazah! Something they used to say back in the Renaissance fair. Chet Zion Hey, which means, hey, look at this! Whoa, this is incredible. Hoit! Hey Vav Yod Tav. It means this is the existing. I knew a guy named Hoyt Yateman who did an incredible invention of animation back in the 70s at UCLA. Anyway, Ed Dai, or Ayin Dalet, Dalet Yod. This is, you might say, witness sufficiently. This is written kind of in Aramaic syntax, Daniel chapter 2, verse 34. The Gezer, Hey Tav, Gimel Zion Resh, Gazar, Gezer. Gezer means to be, to cut. Okay? I didn't write down too easily. Oh, here. Gimel Zion Vav Resh, to cut with scissors, shearing, or mowing. But it also means decided, decreed, or ordered. You make a decision and you cut this off, and now this is this and this is that. But it also means carrot. Why a carrot? Carrot is a thing you chop up into pieces. Divided, edict, or prohibition. Gimel Zion Resh Hey, figure, cut, shape, carving, or sector. It's also the root of the word etymology for Gimel Zion Resh Vav Nun, to derive a word. So the same way that words are chopped up into pieces, well, that's this Erictology stuff we're doing. So, huzzah! This is the reality. Here's the witness sufficient. Chopping up words. I like Erictology, like what we're doing here. Eben, that's the word stone. Aleph bet nun. Well, Aleph means I will. Bet nun is the word son, so I will be a son. Aleph bet is the word father, but it's also to have this passion for something. Nun is to engage. So remember the voice from heaven. This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. He's just doing Yeshua said, I only do what I see my father do and say what I hear him saying. That heart that Yeshua had is the essence of the word eben, stone. Dalet Yod, again, sufficient or such that, Lamed Aleph, that means no or the negative, Bet Yod Dalet Yod Nun, by the hand. But Yod Dalet means hand or power, but Yod Dalet Yod Nun means aggressive, fisticuffer, pugnacious person. So he's saying, hey, there's this stone that's going to make decisions or cutting up the words like a carrot, but it's going to fight not by human hands. And then the word is Vav Mem Chet Tav, weaving, strike, smite, to strike upon, wipe out, hinder, prevent, assign payment, recognize as an expert. It also means Chet Tav, to snatch up fire, terror, destruction, ruin, shattered, dismayed. What's it saying? Not by human hands, terror, not by human hands, like Bruce Lee. He could come out in 1 inch, boom. He didn't even have to. What I'm saying is, it's not an expert of fighting. It's not a terror by fighting by Lamed Zadi Lamed Mem Aleph. Zadi Lamed Mem means image, semblance, cross, like semblance or resemblance, an image of something, something cut off to be darker, a great darkness. Wait a minute, it's not a terror of great darkness of fighting. Ayin Lamed hyphen to Resh Gimel Lamed Vav He Yod. Well, Resh Gimel Lamed is feet or legs. This is the story about how many minutes?
A couple of minutes.
Not this. This is the story about the stone hitting the feet and knocking over the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream. And it says it's not by fighting, and it's not this great darkness, but it's something about hitting. The word regal is not just feet or leg, but it means custom, habit, and tradition. And then the word iron, Pei Resh Zion Lamed Aleph, means also iron work, horseshoe, blacksmith, but it also means to Pei Resh Zion means to decentralize, exaggerate, beyond the limit, extended the borders. That's like Protestant denominations, outside the constraint. Then it's the word Het Somic Pei, which is potsherd or uncovering or laying bare, which is what the book Fossilized Customs served to do. And then it's the Vav He Dalet Kuf Tav, thin, minute detail. Dalet Kuf means examine, search, investigate, crumble, deal strictly, meticulous, pedantic, punctilious, that word I used at the beginning. And then He Mem Vav Nun, them, or the meter numerator, from where, in other words, what I think this is saying, that what knocks down the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his vision, that we think, oh, this stone that comes out not hewn by human hands from the mountain, you could read it differently, such that people will look real close at what Yahweh said, go, hey, wait a minute, we've been lied to. This ain't true at all. So regardless of what Lou White does with his business practice, the book Fossilized Customs does wake some people up that you found in prison, and it's saying, wait a minute, the semblance of the cross is some great darkness. Whatever the church has done for the last 2,000 years has brought in a great darkness. But now at this time, at the end of the 730-year curse, ever since Shalmaneser took over and conquered the northern kingdom there in 2 Kings 17, when people go, hey, wait a minute, laying bare and looking at it and looking at every letter and every word Yahweh said and thinking about how to derive words with etymological dictionary there from Ernest Klein and go just a doggone minute, and all these words make sense. The payment was assigned, the curse to be submitted and subjected to our oppressors because we didn't keep Yahweh's words. But if we become an expert at what Yahweh said, they got to be thrown off our back. It's not a matter of mouthing off, making laws, or incriminating, shooting people, throwing them in jail. That's not the answer. More nukes. Let's kill our enemies. That's not the answer. The answer is for us to learn Yahweh's language, Yahweh's Torah, and come back and worship Him in truth as He told us to.
That's right.
We got 1 minute left. You got something to say about that?
You mentioned 1997 earlier. That's the year I went to prison. That's the year I started studying the scripture. A few years later, Fossilized Customs, me and Terry. So I just find, I forget what you said about 1997.
2010 was when the curse was ended.
All right.
Yeah, 9 or 10 or 11, something like that.
To me, that's just like
and
a
that's
calling
when
back.
Remember the resistance we'd always have, and then all of a sudden people's eyes were open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something's going on behind the scenes, and I
Yeah.
believe it has to do with Daniel 2 and 2 Kings 17, and we are in the midst of this happening. Yahweh is our Elohim, and we're going to win this thing, and it has nothing to do with me knowing how to fight better than those guys know how to fight.
That's right.
All right.
It's
That's
Yahweh's words, what He said, what He meant, and here and now is where we're at. Good to be in league with you, Paul.
Likewise.
That's a wrap, gentlemen. Until next time, Eric. It's been a pleasure. Shalom.
Shalom.